Hey, hello. It's Shank. How are you? Can you hear me? Looks like some kind of network issue. Shashank?
I think we're live, right?
Yep, we are live.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
All right, so I'm audible, right?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. So today we want to do something different. Usually we cover most religious things and other similar or related content we cover. Today we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do something on the term on in terms of history itself, right? Because there aren't a lot of history that people know, especially the history
Yes.
that where we are from. Like if you talk about the great kings, people usually go about Ashokas or Shivaji or Akbar, Birbal. One of those names would pop up. But
Mm-hmm.
we do have other names which are prominent, equally prominent, but not
Mm-hmm.
known to many.
Yeah.
Those are the Kannada kings, right? And
Yes.
they are quite famous, by the way. But for some reason, textbooks and history books have kept them somewhat downplayed throughout.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. And the thing is that the real heroes, the people that we're about to talk about, these people are kept hidden, but for some reason, the politicians are, sort of one-upping all of these real heroes at all points of time in our school textbooks, as you see.
Precisely, because not just us, several people feel that way that our history is being told to us in a way that we are either victims or we just been invaded or we just are, you know, worthless people or we are, helpless and we are always in constant turmoil, some kind of thing. So, but we do have a history which talks about, wealthy kingdoms, prosperous kingdoms, and where art, poetry, literature, all of those thrived really well. But that's not the history which is told. As a kid growing up as well, I've read a lot about the Mughals, I've read a lot about the Delhi Sultanate, but not much. I mean, we did, as I'm from Karnataka, we did have a decent portion of Kannada kings as well. But I also noticed even within the Kannada kings, that they've been overshadowed by the Cholas or Pandyas and the Cheras. Again, they would be the Tamil kings, right? So within the same state, you would see a different set of kingdoms or dynasties portrayed, more stronger than the regional ones. It got me to think again. I understand the Cholas and Pandyas were famous in the south, but they were not the only kingdoms. In fact, there have been kingdoms who have had battles with the same Cholas, Pallavas, and Pandyas several times. They even won several of those battles as well within the southern regions. And we've also had battles with the north and other places like Gujarat and other Gujarat, Andhra, and Madhya Pradesh and other regions as well, where the Kannada kings have gotten upper hand. Right. So today we'll just want to just go see those things, like some of those early kingdoms that most people don't know about. Just want to review those. And in terms of those places which you're referring to, those areas where certain kingdoms have not been highlighted, and this would be somewhere in the first century BC during that time, and covering those specific kingdoms which were in the first century BC or post the Mauryan Empire. We want to bring those things in and highlight those specific kingdoms from the fall of Ashoka.
Yes, definitely. So, yeah, we'll be getting into, I think we can do a couple things on each king, and we should be covered, right?
Yeah, that's good enough though.
Yeah.
So again, what we are doing right now is, the primary one. We'll eventually end up doing more detailed one at some point. Whatever we do, we usually cover the basics just to kickstart it, and then eventually we'll have something of their own, right?
Yeah.
Again, bear in mind these are not the only kings, or that we just picked some kings who
Mhm.
happen to be not that famous. Some of them are not that famous, right? And but yeah, there are several kings that we might not even mention over here. But we just won't cover them at some point.
Yes.
Okay. So first, Karnataka, right? Karnataka is a very prominent place. We have a couple of languages here. The primary state language would be Kannada. We have Tulu. We have Konkani. Any other thing which I missed out?
No, you covered all of it.
right? And in terms of the kingdoms, right? We initially during the earlier stages, there was this confusion where which kingdom again in the earlier phase there were no such thing as Kannada kings, Tamil kings, or anything of that sort. Because if you look at the southern regions, they're
Hmm.
pretty much aligned with each other. For example, a kingdom which is Vijayanagar Empire would cover some portions of Andhra and some portions of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, along with Karnataka, right? So it wasn't
Yes.
detailed the way it was. So we will see those kingdoms which may appear in other places as well, but the primary or the capital where they held was what we are discussing today.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So the first kingdom that we would like to talk about would be the Satavahana dynasty. Not much is known about this place, but one thing is evident that this particular kingdom started right after the fall of Ashoka the Great, or Ashoka the king.
Yes.
Right. So this happened somewhere in the first century BC to the third century BC. The kingdom was active, and as I mentioned, there isn't a lot of this particular kingdom. But there's one prominent thing which I want to highlight about this kingdom is that this kingdom is a byproduct or somewhat directly related to the Ishkava dynasty, which happens to be the kingdom of Lord Rama, the dynasty of Lord Rama,
Yes.
right? So this kingdom is it's somewhat tied, or maybe the last related tie to the Ishkava dynasty, right? Going forward, no other kingdoms I've come across which has links to those old solar lunar dynasties. This is the last one I've come across, and
Hmm.
seems like that's where it maybe that dynasty the line ended somewhere over here when Satavahana dynasty was formed, right? And the founder of this dynasty, his name is Shimuka. Again, not much is known. He happens to be at the time of the same during the Ashoka's period, and then once the fall happened, he started his own dynasty and he started ruling it. And the third and prominent king of this dynasty happens to be someone called Satakarni, right? And there were the two kids who were supposed to take the rightful heir, but one person's name was not mentioned throughout because maybe that person died earlier, or during the younger ages, the person could have been dead or killed. The one person's name is from the Satakarani, and again, not much is known about this particular kingdom nor their achievements in terms of what they've come across. Do you want to add on anything to this particular kingdom, though? The dynasty,
Yeah, I
sorry.
mean, yeah, like you stated, the last tie to any sort of royal family with Ishtava dynasty was with the Shatavahana dynasty, and that's what makes it so special. And because of the time constraint, as in the period of time that this dynasty existed, we don't have much upon this. We don't have much history upon this, and whatever was existing is what we know right now. And not even all of the kings are being named within this dynasty because such little piece of information has survived through history. But yeah, you've pretty much covered most of it. And yeah, I think the prominent language was Prakriti, or the
Correct.
same language. Yeah, the same language that
They
was used by
had, if I'm not
Ashoka.
mistaken, three languages: Prakriti, Sanskrit, as well as Kannada were the three
Yeah,
languages.
Kannada.
This is when these are the Kannada kings. This is when Kannada was striving hard, and
Yeah,
the kingdoms were formed as the primary language, though, as they're establishing as Kannada kingdoms.
yeah, Kannada kingdoms. This was one of the Kannada kingdoms, but Kannada was most popular amongst the common folk. But later, when we come across other dynasties, we're gonna get to know that Kannada was implemented within the administrative levels.
Correct.
Up and until now, it is still Sanskrit and Prakriti, which are the prominent languages. Kannada is still an upcoming language, but it is quite popular among the common folk.
Correct. Just want to highlight why that is as well. Again, this is the time where there are several languages out there, right? At the same time, you
Yeah.
could have also identified Malayalam, Tamil, maybe Telugu. All of these languages could be available at the same time as well. However,
Mhm.
Sanskritam or Sanskrit and Prakriti happen to be one of those old languages which they use for communication throughout India. Right? So
Yeah.
they just like how people are pushing for one language concept, they had other language which is pretty much common. So most of the languages they chose to have as a court language seems to be something easy to communicate between kingdoms for any kind of treaty or any kind of alliances or anything of that sort, right?
Yeah.
And not many wanted to make certain languages, as in change the entire idea of changing the certain languages in terms of governance or in terms of state language, which we will see. Someone was brave enough to do it and establish a full fledged Kannada as an official language as we go
Yeah.
through further, right? And
Yes.
yeah, we spoke of the languages, and they also had a good trade system, and they also had, they even though they started at the fall of Ashoka's kingdom, this particular
Mm-hmm.
kingdom did do well for the time they were ruling it, right? And roughly
Yeah.
they were ruling for until third century CE they were ruling it, and until the time they were ruling it, they were still successful and they were doing good, which gave birth to potential other kingdoms within the Karnataka, the southern region, where they could establish
Mhm.
themselves as again. At the same time, when these kingdoms existed, newer
Mhm.
dynasties were also being forming, and they took
Yes.
inspirations from these kingdoms as well. So, Satavahana dynasty, the first one, though we don't have much on it, and that gives birth to something which is famous known as the Kadamba dynasty, right?
Yes.
And the
And
Kadamba dynasty, right? Remember we spoke about the languages, primary language,
mhm.
secondary language. This was the
Yeah.
first uh, kingdom where the
Mhm.
Kannada kings ruled for over 200 years, and there was no other kingdom where Kannada king ruled for as a kingdom or the kings were ruling for 200 years straight. This was the only kingdom
Yes.
to start with.
The OG.
The OG, yeah.
Yeah, so remember I told you about the first, up and coming language being Kannada, and then Kadamba dynasty was actually the first one to use Kannada at an administrative level. Up until now, it was just Sanskrit or Prakriti or other languages being used as an administrative level language used to communicate with ministers and the royal people. But this was the first one that made Kannada sort of a prominent language, and this is where the rise of Kannada started. The actual rise of Kannada started.
Correct. And they had a really good time, the ruling as well. I mean, the kingdoms thrived during their rule, and not to mention
Hmm.
they ruled from somewhere between the fourth century or sixth century, right? And
Hmm.
see, and the capital was Banavasi, and
Hmm.
ironically, their emblem happened to be a lion, and the flag which they had,
Hmm.
which had a Vanara as an insignia on the flag, right? Again,
Yes,
them being from Karnataka, Hampi from being from, Hampi is in Karnataka, and Vanara
Kishkinda.
from Hampi,
Yeah.
all of those things, just adding up together. But yeah, the flag they had was of Vanara, and the founder of this particular dynasty was Mayura Varma, also known as Mayura Sharma in some places, but mostly Mayura
Yes.
Varma, right? And
Yes.
this particular dynasty, right, during this the Kadamba period, the kings mostly fought within the southern kingdoms, and the prominent player at this point of time as an opponent would be the Pallavas from Kanchi, Kanchipuram now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
Mayura Varma was a person who had been to Kanchi to study, right? And
Hmm.
again, he was a founder of this religion, and for some reason they did not identify him or acknowledge him as a individual king or in a kingdom. Right? This is the problem he had in Tamil Nadu, where he had been to Kanchipuram. Again, not Tamil Nadu at that point. Kanchipuram was separate place, right? Tamil king.
Yeah.
So he'd been there,
Hmm.
and once he had interactions with the people over there, they did not respect him as an individual king because he was a new kingdom, and he was
Hmm.
insulted there. So, as a revenge, what he did was he started a war. He goes to Kanchi, he defeats them, and then he earns the respect saying that I am an individual king and my kingdom is as good king that kingdom as any other kingdom. And going forward, you will start respecting the kingdom. That's I don't know if that's cool or not, but that sounds badass.
Definitely. Most, sometimes we do forget that these are men filled with high testosterone. These are like roadmen, real men that we're dealing with. And, you know, those men used to wage war on enemies, and today we have men who can't even wage a war against their own sexuality. So so that's kind of comical.
Like, you're pulling me into some other discussion. No,
Yeah, just
back then, men, like real men, were about 16 years of age. That's like real men
yes.
already started. I was like 30 plus, and you're still somewhat of a boy, more or less. Like, it's like, yeah, boyish.
Yeah, I mean, I had to pull that off. I mean, you can't expect me to stay quiet on that.
Yes, sir. So, yeah, Mayura Verma, again, the person, not much have I read about him. I might have known a thing or two. Again, not much, not enough has been discussed about this particular king or this dynasty. We know the Kadamba
Mhm.
dynasty existed, but again, like I said, the justice is it's not on the same level as what we give other dynasties, or other kingdoms, or other kings. Is what my complaint is.
Yeah.
So enter his son. His name is Kakusta Varma, and
Hmm.
he happens to be known as the most powerful king from the Kadamba dynasty. Like if his father was this badass, I don't know how the son was. Though, what did he do? Like did someone make fun of his outfit or something and just went and burnt some kingdoms? I don't know, but he was equal. He was considered as the most powerful king from the Kadamba dynasty, though.
Yeah, I think powerful rather than powerful. I think fierce is the right word over there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, they had a really good time, as in the duration that they ruled. Again, it wasn't for long, but again for 200 years, and
Hmm.
for a dynasty not to have any outside interference, and also they established their kingdom as a new kingdom, by the way. They established their
Hmm.
kingdom. They established their right to rule for 200 years. That's a big achievement in itself, because again, as I mentioned, during this time they were warring with other states or other kingdoms out there. We had
Hmm.
Pallavas. We had the I think this point of time I don't think the Cholas were there yet, right? So
No, they
maybe
come in later.
yeah. So other surroundings they were watching. They were wearing were waging war. Sorry, and
Yeah.
those were still constant, right? And there were other
Hmm.
players as well from the north too, right? And again, this point of time we didn't have the Islamic invasion yet. That comes in later as
Hmm.
well. So it was
Hmm.
mostly conflict within the country, and there was
Yes.
definitely conflict.
I mean, that is the common layout of all of these kingdoms. Everyone, each and everyone, fighting for their own survival while defeating others. So this is where we see. I think they have a vast kingdom, but not as vast as say the Chalukya dynasty. But yeah, northern Karnataka and Konkan region was, I think, their primary area of ruling. But it was not as large as other kingdoms that come in the future after them. So yeah, it was
Correct.
still a budding empire.
Budding empire, yep. And the next in the list falls the Western Ganga. Again, as a kid, when I read, I've never heard of this particular dynasty at all. The Western Ganga dynasty. I don't know if
Yeah,
you come across.
shocking.
I've never heard of this. There are prominent players over here as well, but I never heard of this. I mean, this entire thing, someone maybe have skipped it. I think maybe when I first came across one, I thought maybe it's a name for a different place. We just got it wrong. When Ganga is not here, and why would someone name it Western Ganga Dynasty? But then
Yeah.
I started doing some information, started doing some research on these things, and I found this also known as Gangavadi or Gangavadi, and this is another big civilization, another big dynasty in itself, and they
Mhm.
weren't any less to the previous ones or the upcoming ones either. For example,
Yes.
the king who started this was the Durbinata, who was the king, who was the
Hmm.
founder of this particular dynasty. He too was
Hmm.
warring with Pallavas. Again,
Hmm.
Pallavas again being a prominent. So throughout this, you would notice a trend, right? That is,
Hmm.
Pallavas and other kingdoms would have a problem. And Pallavas have established themselves as a prominent kingdom on one side.
Hmm.
So we have different
Yes.
kingdoms over here. Not that the other kingdoms were out; they were still existing, but there were bigger players who were coming in. Like the Western Ganga dynasty was a big thing which happened at that point of time. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean the Kadambas were fully eradicated altogether, right? So they were present in small number. Again, there's a rise and there's a fall, there's a rise story, right? As you can see, some kingdoms would have a really good time, and some kingdoms may slowly start, uh, getting away, or becoming invincible, more or less, right? And that's
Yeah.
pretty much what's happening here. And these
Mm-hmm.
guys fought Pallavas as well. And
Mm-hmm.
over here, the king over here was who was planning it in a certain way, that more like an investment, right? As how you see the new companies who comes in, or the IPOs are opened up, you invest in certain companies, and then you keep it, you park it aside. At some point later, it comes to fruition. A similar
Yeah.
fashion,
Mm-hmm.
this particular person invested in a great company called the Chalukyas, right? And how did he invest it? He married his daughter to the new and emerging power. Again, they weren't dominant, they weren't prominent. This is again a new kingdom, dynasty which opened up called the Chalukyas, right? So he made a pact by, signing off his daughter. You know what? Hey, marry my daughter. We'll be buddies, best buddies. And here's the fun part. This particular kingdom ruled for over 650 years with 23
Damn.
different kings who took turns to rule, and they ruled happily ever after with the help of Chalukyas on this. And they maintained the relationship with Chalukyas for a very long time,
Yes.
right? And that's again a big, how did we not know about this place or this dynasty there?
Exactly. And to think that one of the biggest monolithic statues, the Gomateshwara, was built by the Western Ganga dynasty, and still not even a greater acknowledgement of this kingdom being done in our school textbooks. It's quite shocking. And the Gomateshwara temple, of course, I think it's in Shravanabelagola, if I'm not wrong.
Hmm.
And yeah, this was built by Western dynasty itself. And yeah, later, after building all of these monuments, they partnered up with other dynasty, and sort of invested, and they got great returns for it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, as you mentioned, they did. They were the first person, or not the first, not just the first person, the best person, I would say. Though they had the single largest statue, which is Gomateshwara,
Yeah.
which is still standing and still one of the legendary ones out there.
Yeah.
And the person who started this dynasty, his name was Kongani Varma. A lot of Varmas you would hear across at this point, right? So he was the first
Yeah.
king, and he founded it, and he founded it somewhere in you know earlier times when he was looking. So yeah, he found it somewhere in the 350 C area, and
Hmm.
the kingdom again was striving and was going successful until the next set of players came in. I think we noticed about the over here. Let's just say we're talking about a hero and a villain, right? So we had
Hmm.
Pallavas who had been there throughout as the warring
Hmm.
faction on the other side, where the Kannada
Hmm.
kings had to battle. During this time, the end of the Western Ganga dynasty is when the Cholas come in, right? And
Yeah.
their battle, as in the at around 1004 CE, they lost their
Mhm.
final battle, and that was to Cholas, though. And
Yeah.
until then, they had a really good time of 650 years they ruled, and they followed Jainism primarily, right? And they also had other religions as well. And here's a fun fact: there is no historic record of any, even though they followed multiple religions, they open in a way secular concept. There were no
Mhm.
reports or any documentation of any religious uh, fights or arguments, anything of that sort at all. For almost 650 years, nothing has been recorded. Not even a single misunderstanding between two factions have come across. Right?
Yeah, the
And
peace was really maintained.
yep, that's a big deal. Again, that's a big one though. Just to say that they've maintained it in such a way that no one would get into any arguments.
Hmm. Yeah, and the later kingdoms that come into play, so many religious wars are there, so many disputes regarding languages, communities, communalism, and so many things take place. But the fact that they managed to keep a peace for more than 600 years, that's a big deal. Like, just that just tells you how great of a politicians they were.
Exactly. So, as we discussed, we mentioned about how these kingdoms may layer over another region, modern day region, because back in time we did not segregate as Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, those kind of ways,
Yeah.
right? So they would
Mhm.
layer around certain places, and for example, these guys were laid around Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, and a little bit
Mhm.
of Andhra was involved, right? Certain places were covered, the borders and other things. So again, languages, different languages were involved, right? And different religions were there, and yet all of them were living peacefully during which means the kingdom was good, and you only come across certain issues, right? When something is terribly bad, if everyone's happy, everyone's good, then you don't have to go find other issues. So the
Yeah,
650 years was a good time, is how you can understand from whatever information we have, that they had a really good time. Their creativity, the way they build stone structures, all of them are really good, which means they invested in education and other things as well.
yeah, definitely. And the proper development of the whole Kannada culture, Kannada being popularized during this time after the Kadamba dynasty, and then they sort of took off after that time, and they took Kannada to a whole new level after that. The literature really came through, and the fact that they ruled over, I think, south of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. So all of these came under their reign. So Kannada really took a massive, development throughout this point, and then it just goes upwards from here.
Yes, sir. So, as we mentioned, the big players come in here. So,
Hmm.
as we discussed earlier, right, that just because a new player comes in doesn't mean the old kingdom was destroyed. Because if you look at the numbers, so Chalukyas were around 543 CE to 753 CE, whereas
Yeah.
the Ganga dynasty, they lost their battle to the Cholas around 1004 CE, right? So,
Hmm.
which means though Chalukyas were prominent at the time of 543 CE to 753 CE, the
Hmm.
other kingdoms also existed simultaneously. So why I'm
Yes.
trying to highlight this particular discussion is the kingdoms did not fall and another rose because of that. It's not a story where this kingdom was here at this point of time and then they fell and someone else took over. No, we had kingdoms which coexisted along with it, right?
Hmm.
But again, it may not be playing a primary role. It wouldn't have have the same power as what Chalukyas had during this time, but
Hmm.
they did exist, right?
Yes.
Coming to Chalukyas, right? And
Hmm.
this is where you'll find a lot of stories. Again, this is an area where I've noticed a lot of history has been recorded, documented, which we have as
Hmm.
textbooks as well. For some reason, they covered Chalukyas. Someone likes Chalukyas, I guess, right? And talk about the first founder, Pulikeshin one, and he had his
Hmm.
capital in Badami, also known as Vatapi, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Vadapi,
And
yes. Yeah.
yeah, and he again, Pulikeshin. I remember these names because when I was in school, the names would actually have one, two, three, four, right? As in, we had
Hmm.
different like Pulikesi one, Pulikesi two, Krishnadevaraya, like, not Kirtivarma one, Kirtivarma two, Kirtivarma three. I'm like, so we had several of these things. At some point, you would notice that the names were recycled. At some point, they're out of names.
Yeah, they just turned on the recycling, and then yeah, so many kings with the same name.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not at all confusing. Just so you know, you'll have one, two, three having some certain things to do, and you don't know which one did which one, but you just know it's one of those. Them, one of those Kirtivarmas, one of those publications did that, right? But yeah, didn't make it easy though.
Yeah, and you just hope that you got everything right in order, and yeah, the whole thing was just confusing.
Yes, sir. But I want to talk about the first three kings of this dynasty because I find the first three kings to have played a more prominent role. We
Hmm.
mentioned about Pulikeshin. He is the founder of this particular kingdom, dynasty. And remember when we mentioned about the previous discussions as well, where the kingdom, as in the king Durvinatha, who
Hmm.
had married his daughter to the Chalukyas, and that comes somewhere over
Hmm.
here when he married to this individual, and that's when this entire kingdom was in the initial stages. Then comes Kirtivarma, who's a son of Pulikesin, and Pulikesin
Hmm.
one, sorry, to be specific, right?
Yeah.
And this person is known to be one of the greatest again in this particular dynasty because he combined. and he consolidated all the Chalukyas. At the same time, there were different Chalukya kingdoms as well. For example, as we go further, you would notice someone called the Kalyani or Kalyana Chalukyas or Western
Mm-hmm.
Chalukyas in general, right? So he combined all the Chalukyas together and he
Mm-hmm.
subjugated the Kadamba. So this is when we are seeing the warring between southern kingdoms itself, right? Somewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
this was the kingdom. Chalukyas were the ones that put Kadambas to their end, right? And
Yes.
so Kirtivarma one played a major role when it comes to the
Mhm.
Chalukyas.
Yes. And the most prominent role, I think, when you mentioned him uniting the three Chalukyas, let's just make that clear. Three Chalukya dynasties were existing at the same point of time. One was the Badami Chalukya dynasty, which we're talking about right now, which is in the south part of India, and the other one being the Vengi dynasty, which is the eastern Chalukya dynasty. So it was in the east part. And then there's also the third one, which is the Western Chalukya dynasty, which is known as the Kalyani dynasty, which is the one that you mentioned. So all of these were coexisting at one point of time. I mean, not that all three of them existed at the same point. It's just that the existence period overlapped for each one of them. So at one point, all three of these were united, and it ended up becoming the first largest empire to govern India at one point of time. And again, we are talking about Akhand Bharat being that inclusive of Pakistan, and none of the partitions had happened yet. So this is the larger empire of India that we're talking about, and this was one of the first ones to unite all of these smaller empires and make one huge empire. And all of this consisted of Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha, and I think there was Gujarat as well. I remember reading Gujarat, and also one more fun fact that I read. Just one last fact about the Chalukya thing. The Chalukyas were originally belonging to the Rajput clan. So the Rajput clan is something that not many people know about. So these belong to the Solanki dynasty, and from the Solanki dynasty, the lineage comes towards the Badami and the southern and the eastern and the western Chalukya. So they sort of divided up at one point of time. But yeah, originally the lineage comes from the Solanki clan of the Rajputs. So it has quite a bit of history.
That's interesting. And again, as you mentioned, they all pretty much overlapped at some point, and then someone took the initiative to consolidate them, and that was a big work in itself because no one would want to, let's just say three kingdoms, right? And I come to you and say, you know what, let's make one kingdom, and I'll be the king of all of those three lands. Not
Yeah.
a nice conversation to have with, I'm guessing though, right? And somehow he made it happen, like to whatever means possible. So he made it happen, and that's again is considered one of the biggest achievements. But it didn't stop there because he subjugated the Kadambas, right? But
Yeah.
there's someone else
Yeah.
who came in after that, right? So after that, again, when we mentioned about Pulicasin one, somewhere later
Mhm.
Pulicasin two is the king who comes in, and
Mhm.
he has a son called Vikramaditya one, right?
Yes.
And he's a third son of Pulicasin two, so it's like confusing. Okay, Pulicasin two's third son is Vikramaditya one, right? Let's give it this way, right? And I think they
Yeah.
should have done a better job at naming people, or the titles are really bad, right? So
Yeah.
this person again did something which uh, not an easy task. Again, we had the Pallavas back in time, right?
Mhm.
Pallavas attacked the Chalukyas,
Mhm.
and he made them retreat. Again, he defeated the Pallavas and he made them retreat. He too capital the same Badami or Vatapi, and
Mhm.
he had successful win against the Pallavas, and his grandfather had successful win against the Kadambas. So they were doing really good, the Chalukyas, at this point of time.
Yes.
Both the
And
sides.
also, yeah, so we were discussing about also one more thing that I wanted to add on before so the Chalukyas actually, their primary language was Tamil, and there was an influence of Kannada as well. But yeah, they were primarily Tamil speaking, Tamil speaking dynasty after the Western Ganga dynasty did so much work on the Kannada literature.
Mm-hmm.
These were the Tamil speaking royal family, and Tamil literature also gained a bit of traction, a lot of traction at that point of time. So this was a period when there were a lot of religions being introduced, and and I think at this point of time, Islam was about to no. Is that a
Not
different
yet,
point of
not
time?
yet. No, not yet. They're
Yeah,
coming later though.
yeah. I think the Islamic invasion happens later, a lot later. I think before the
Post the
Vijayanagar
Cholas,
Empire.
I guess. I think
Yeah,
somewhere during the Cholas or post the Cholas, 1100 somewhere they come in, I guess.
I think post the Cholas, if I'm not wrong.
Wait, let me check my info. Hold on. Some innovation, system Chandragupta dynasty, Pallava dynasty, Rashtrakuta, Shankaracharya, Chalukyas, Kalyani defeat the Rashtrakutas, Northern camping. Okay, the Cholas were there in the 1030s. No, Cholas, Alburini came to India in 1030, and
Yeah, just after the Chalukya dynasty perished, the Islamic invasion happened. I
yep, I think it
think.
was 1148 or 1192. So because during this time is when Prithviraj Chauhan defeated the Muhammad Ghuri and the Battle of Terrain, he defeated him. Hold on 1 second. Let me get my book boys. Right. So I think if I'm not mistaken, this happened around the 1100. But let me just check. If at all you have any doubt, always refer to Dr. Vikram Sampath. He knows his stuff. So just have to go look for his info. Like we have good historians. This what least historians were making an attempt to put things in place, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So here's funny thing. Initially, there were minor raids by the people of Afghanistan,
Hmm.
and this happened
Hmm.
somewhere in 1977 to 1186 CE, right? And
Okay.
again, this was from the Turkish. This was again during the initial stage of Ghazna in Zabulistan, today's eastern Afghanistan. Nazir Abdullahi is a Turkish slave officer, and he's from Samani dynasty of Khorasan, right? And he broke away
Hmm.
from his group, and he starts
Hmm.
his uh, own dynasty, and that's called the Ghaznavides. That becomes Muhammad Ghazni. So it's in
Yeah, Muhammad Ghazni.
1977.
Hmm.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Still saying
And
something.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, no, no. Yeah, you continue. I was just about to confirm that. I mean, just say that. That's what I found.
Sorry, not 1977. My bad. 977.
Yeah,
977.
yeah,
What is it?
yeah,
1977. Like that.
yeah. Even I got confused at one point, and then yeah, 977 seems
No.
about right.
977 to 1186 CE, the common era. I got
Yeah.
said incorrectly though. But yeah, initially we had minor raids from Muhammad Ghazni and his group of
Hmm.
invaders. I think 1001 CE they had issues. They had issue with Punjab and Kabul, other areas. They had their warring. Other things were going on. That was during this
Hmm.
period. And but yeah, they prominently took place, as in they took action from looting other things somewhere in
Hmm.
1010, 2005 CE though. That's when you see the looting of Mathura happened.
Yeah, exactly. That's when most of these temples were raided, and so much wealth was looted. So yeah, I think that was the time. Muhammad Ghazni, I think, was the most hard hitting ruler who has ever hit India, right?
I wouldn't call ruler, invader.
Yeah,
Let's keep it that way.
tyrant.
Yeah, because
Tyrant is a
it
better word.
wasn't like a kingdom kind of. These were raiding parties at some point. These were just people who came, assume that you had a couple of thieves who formed
Hmm.
a group and they went on stealing, and then they had sufficient money or something. They started, establishing a kingdom of their own at some point. That's pretty much what
Yeah,
happened over here. These were just common bandits, more or less.
yeah. And fun fact, the whole controversy about the sati culture. when your husband dies, the women go ahead and fall into fire pits altogether. And when Mughal ruler invades your country and defeats your king. I think this happened after Prithviraj Chauhan and another couple rulers. But yeah, so this became really popularized during the whole Mughal invasion phase, Islamic invasion phase, and people think that it's some sort of ritual that is performed as a form of devotion of the wife towards husband, but that's not really the reason. The real reason why the whole sati ritual is performed is because when these Mughal invaders invaded India and they conquered a kingdom, or with their, they had mass numbers, they had huge numbers, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, foot soldiers, ready to battle. Of course, many of the rulers at that point of time, they were overwhelmed with these numbers. And once a kingdom is captured, these Mughal invaders used to literally rape the dead bodies of women. So that's how down bad they were. Once they raped the dead bodies of women, they used to sort of discard them in I would not like to describe that part, but yeah, this is why the whole sati culture was popularized during that time. It was not the first time that it was introduced. It was the first time that it was popularized. It was encouraged for women, once their husband dies in battle, they would, you know go and fall into the fire pit, just to avoid this sort of insult to a dead body. So that's just one misconception that I wanted to get out. Just one fact.
Got it. Just one small addition I wanted to. So at this point, there were not Mughals yet. So there would be, well, Mughals comes after
Yeah,
Delhi Sultanate. So there would be the Ghaznavids, whatever
yeah.
they went by, right? So, but yeah, whatever I said is the same thing. There were a lot of these things happening. It wasn't, sati is not a religious practice. It was a self-defense
Yeah.
practice in a way where women did not want to get humiliated. Again, the humiliation, we've discussed about in our Ramayana podcast as well, right? The
Yeah.
humiliation of the country is greater. King's Lord Rama himself had to disown Sita because of the very same reason. Rajadharma mattered a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
they did not give that to them. The people of the country cannot be, shouldn't be feeling ashamed because what happened to the queen. So they did, or whatever happened to their women. So they did this to protect themselves from the invaders. However, that was
Yes.
somewhat pushed into a religious aspect, and people started talking sati as a religious thing, but it was never a religious thing at all, right? But it's easy to blame anything ancient India, right? Because it's, Indians, like, because that's the whole point. What we had when the British had the same notion, right? I mean, you guys cannot be
Mm-hmm.
smart because if we need to rule you, you have to be some kind of barbarian. So we need whatever we can get on you, and that's how the British got us as well, right? They convinced that you are barbarian. And here's a funny story. People even today believe that Indians, especially Indians, even today, though they are Indians, I still feel that they are somewhat of a traitor because they still buy these Aryan invasion theories. They still think that the Western people are the ones who came in and gave us knowledge and anything of that sort, and Indians are inherently stupid that they couldn't come up on their own. I was watching this video of an interview of this historian and author Dalrymple, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
he goes on saying about his new book just came in this year, The Golden Road, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how India played a major role in the entire world and how they contributed towards a lot of things. And he
Mm-hmm.
also says that we gave algebra, the Indians gave algebra, Indians gave, take the numbers, right? We have the Roman numerals, we have the Arabic numerals. We follow the Arabic numerals, right? The 1, 2, 3 is the Arabic
Yeah.
numerals. Roman numerals
Yeah.
is the V 1, 1. And it says
Mm-hmm.
for the Westerners, those are Arabic numerals. For the Arabs, it's Indian numerals because those are Indian numbers, right? But the credit is
Yeah.
given to them because they took it from the Arabs. They got it from the Arabs. But where is the Arabs get from? India. So the Arabs themselves call us Indian numerals over there, right? It's called it numerals. But we be told these are Arabic numerals, so Indians don't get credit over there. And he talks about, how Brahmagupta has come up with calculations which are so precise. Even to a decimal point, we have information over there. Aryabhata's work, and all of this were given to the earlier Persians, right? When they came
Mm-hmm.
in looking for, trade, other things, those were given,
Mm-hmm.
and they have proof of that. We don't have. By the way, just here's a funny thing: we don't have any proof of those things. They have proof of those things, right? and he says there's a lot of things that Indians have done which they don't get credit for, and some
Mhm.
of the West was West somewhat was easy to convince us that we are not the stupid. We are nothing but whatever we get is from leftovers from what the British left us, right? That's how they made us feel, and people still bite it on notion. Though. People still, even though uh, they are in India, they call themselves proud Indians. They still think that no, we wouldn't be anywhere if it weren't for the British. How stupid is that?
Extremely stupid. And no matter how much you convince these people, of course they are aware of the Indian history, what we're capable of, what we were capable of, and even though they know all of this information, they still deny the fact that we can be so capable of doing all of these things on our own than waiting for a handout from another kingdom or another invasion. It's just a way of thinking of people, I would say.
I know. So yeah, that's the problem here. I think what we are doing over here, we're trying to bring out certain things. At some point, we would cover these things. Expose certain things which are not known. Maybe a small speck, but let's just assume one or two people get to watch it, and one or two people
Mhm.
try to do some research. One or two people try to pay attention to certain things. There's one impact, right? That's all that matters at the end of the day. And what we
Yes.
are sharing over here is something which, again, not the very, again, as I said, right, not what we share is interesting to everyone. Not many people are out
Yeah.
there today. You know what? I need to today. I woke up. Let me just go find what Chalukyas are doing. Like no one really cares about that, right? So, but some of them might be. There is someone out there who will be wondering, like, who are the Chalukyas? What is the Kadamba dynasty? Someone might be wondering, like, for this might find that person. That person may be like, you know what? Okay, I got a thing or two. Let me go do my own research now and let me just have more knowledge. That's the whole point of what we're doing. Hope we
Exactly. At
don't
least,
stop this anytime soon.
definitely. Yeah. If even if we bring awareness to one person about our great history instead of relying on other countries, I think we have changed one way of thinking, and I'm gonna take that any day. I'm satisfied with that.
Yes, sir. One step at a time, I guess.
Yep. Mhm.
Speaking of one step at a time, the Rashtrakuta dynasty. I think the next big players of the southern kingdoms. So
Yes.
Rashtrakuta, okay, this is another kingdom which has its own rich culture,
Mhm.
right? And the founder of this particular dynasty was Amoga Varsha, and he is also known as the greatest emperor of Rashtrakuta dynasty as well. Right, the founder himself also labeled himself as the greatest, you know, emperor. And the
Yeah.
reason why, because again, during the time they come in, they didn't have any regular kingdoms. They had strong kingdoms, right? So for him to establish
Mhm.
something strong and have taking over the Chalukya kingdom again. Chalukya was a prominent player at this point in time. For him to
Yeah.
take that over, he has to be the greatest at this point, because it's not possible to do otherwise, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
he also holds another record which not just India, even other places this is something which has not been found. That is, he ruled
Mhm.
for 64 years straight, and that's the
Mhm.
longest and precise dated ruling of anyone on record. 64 years.
Yes,
And
and that's a really special thing because if you consider the timelines of kings, most of them die by the age of 40 to 45 max because either they're killed in some kind of war or they die due to some kind of a disease. But most of them are just killed in war against the kingdom that's trying to overthrow them. So 64 years is a long time.
exact 64 years if he's ruled it, assuming that he got the kingdom around 1718.
Yeah.
Still, that's a big, was it 70 plus? He was around like 70, 75 plus, right? He was still ruling it in the same, with the same mind and stout physique. And if he'd been there doing what he'd been doing and no one overtook him, no one usurped the throne, anything of that sort, and he still held the kingdom for such a long time, he was,
Yeah.
and no wonder he's called the greatest emperor of Rashtrakuta, because that's near to impossible, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And
And
this the
go
scale
ahead,
of
sorry.
this empire, yeah, the scale of this empire is roughly similar to the Chalukya dynasty, except that It does not stretch towards much towards north. Odisha and Gujarat are not covered, but rest of the empires, they overlap with the Rashtrakuta Empire. So the Chalukya Empire had Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Gujarat, and the Rashtrakuta Empire has all of these kingdoms except for Odisha and Gujarat. So yeah, that was quite a big empire at that point of time. And also one more significant thing for the Rashtrakuta dynasty, the same king that you mentioned was also responsible for starting the construction of the Kailasa temple at Ellora. The marvelous temple that we see today that has been carved out of a cave. That was the Kailasa temple. So that's quite a big thing. And this is the same temple, I believe, if I'm not wrong. We we say that aliens were responsible for building this Kailasa temple because of how marvelous it is, and
Hmm.
it was carved out of one single stone, as in the entire temple was carved out of one single stone. And the remains of that temple, so many carvings, tons and tons, thousands of tons are supposed to be remaining out of that temple, but we don't find the remains anywhere near the site, not even anywhere near the entire vicinity and the kingdom itself. We don't find the remains at all. That's quite suspicious if you ask me. And the whole Kailasa temple, the whole special thing about it is, instead of building it up to uh, sorry down to up, they built it top to down. So the crown was carved first, and then the cone, the dome was carved next, and then the temple, the basement, everything was carved next. So that's the really special thing about so yeah.
Like it's been laser carved or some laser
Yeah,
or something of that sort, right?
yeah, kind of like that, like laser, just the rock has evaporated out of thin air and into thin air, and the temple just started existing over there. And the fact that they completed this, not centuries, not decades, just 20 years. I think I read it somewhere that they completed it within 20 years, within the reign of one king. That's next to impossible. You see less significant, less impressive structures taking centuries together to build, and you see this Kailasa temple being built within a fraction of that time. So yeah.
Interesting. So, temples are another thing which we did not discuss much earlier.
Yeah.
Though during this time we had prominent Jain temples, Buddhist temples, as well as Hindu temples in southern India as well. Another thing which
Mhm.
we noticed that southern kings never intended to conquer several lands. It wasn't their intent. You would never see them going out in the north and trying to conquer much. Not because they were not
Yeah.
capable of. It was just they were not their interest though. And you can say this because it's a trend followed by all of them. I think, if I'm not mistaken, one or two kings have tried conquering other places, but again,
Mhm.
these were for different reasons and not because of, in terms of owning places, anything of that sort. However, the only few times that almost entire India was under a single rule was
Mhm.
during the time of Ashoka, where he almost got India under a single rule. And during
Yeah.
the Mughals as well, the Mughals did a good job in terms of getting them. Uh,
Hmm.
Delhi Sultanate tried, but they couldn't as well. For some reason, South was never conquered. South always remained somewhat free, right? Even though no matter
Yeah.
where they conquered, South was always which was resisting. The only time entire India was controlled by a single entity was in the time of British. I think they're the only ones who made that happen. Other than that,
Yeah.
no other northern kingdoms could conquer South fully, and southern kings were never interested in conquering any other places. They were happy with, uh, or maybe happy with what they had, or maybe they were warring between each other, and they kept themselves busy, but they didn't go out and explore north. Is what I've noticed in terms of not one kingdom or two dynasties, like almost all of them, right? Uh,
Yeah.
the ones which broke out, Cholas are the one. I think is Rajendra Chola, someone who wanted to, yeah, I think Rajendra Chola, who wanted to
Hmm.
get water, Ganga water, to his new capital, and then some king interrupted, and he went ahead and started conquering those lands. Again, that was for a different, like a power play, which he wanted to put himself in a position. But other than
Hmm.
that, there was no need for him to conquer. right? So that's a trend I
Yeah,
noticed for southern kings.
and yeah, and also if you notice, when you mention the North kingdoms being all united and then they never coming to the south, I think the resistance started in the Maharashtra region itself. Uh, the whole culture of rebellion started in the Maharashtra culture. I'm not able to pin the name of uh, the great warrior Shivaji Maharaj. I think uh, what was his dynasty's name? Chhatrapati
Sorry, no, no, wait, hold on. I think
Chhatrapati
it's
Shivaji, I think, was the major rebellion force.
Marathas, sorry, Marathas.
Yeah, exactly. Marathas. The Maratha kingdom was, I think, the
Get out of
most.
the mind.
Yeah, I was not able to get that name, and then I was struggling with it. So yeah, the Maratha kingdom, I think, was the most rebellious, and that's what stopped the invasion. I think they never made it past the Marathas, and I think that's why the south was, like, the most liberal place. Not gonna say liberal, but I think it was not controlled by the kingdom that was in the north.
I agree. So I think there was, this person called Praveen Mohan, right? He goes
Yeah,
around and he pulls out archaeology and stuff, right? Temples.
yeah, the
There's a
archaeologist.
podcast which he was doing, and he
Hmm.
said the only reason southern states have their temples in place because the northern kingdoms sacrifice theirs. That was like a very hard hitting. No southern person should be proud of, we have more temples older than yours, because the
Yeah,
northern kingdoms gave their temples and they protected yours because they were constantly having these invasions and they fought them
yeah.
off, which is why you were able to keep your temples as long as you could. And yeah, when you see from one perspective, it looks like, yeah, you know what, Southern, we have a lot of temples here and they're older, and you guys do not have a lot of temples. It's easy to make that statement. But when you look at from all possible angles, as you mentioned, resistance started way before, right? So,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, the first one was Punjab, and we had several kings and even queens, by the way. Ahila
Mhm.
Bai Holkar, one of those prominent people as well, right? All of them had put a lot of resistance since the beginning of time, and
Yeah.
since the invaders had to fight off all of these people, by the time they couldn't have their roots strong in the south because they were still fighting then. And here's the fun thing, I was reading this book on the Varanasi Kashi Vishweshwara temple
Hmm.
issue, right?
Hmm.
uh, from the time this started, from when before Aurangzeb's issue started, at 1669 when Aurangzeb destroyed the temple. Since
Hmm.
then, till 2022, there were ongoing cases, which means the battle was still
Yeah.
going on. 1669. So it wasn't that easy. It wasn't like, they destroyed the temple, move on. No, the battle was still going on till 2022. It's still ongoing, by the way, just put on hold because of
Yeah.
ASA surveys going on, right? And that's not going on. They're completed, but something which has been pended because of the I think 2024 they had a Ram Janmabhoomi incident, so they didn't want to have two things at the same time, so they put them on hold. I don't know what's happening at this point. I think we'll get to it at
Hmm.
some point, but the argument was going on. And here's one, by the way, Hoysala king. I forgot the name of the king though. The Hoysala king, he gave an entire village just
Hmm.
for jizya tax, so that the Varanasi's temple will be able to pay the tax. A king
I
gave his entire village just for tax purposes. Like,
Is it
that's
Vishnuvardhana?
let me look for the person, the person name of the person. I'll just get the person's name. Hold on. I'm not sure the name though. Could be Vishnuvardhana, but maybe someone else, I guess though. That's why, yeah, I'll get that in a minute. Meanwhile, you were just saying something, sorry.
Yeah, I was just, I was making a wish. I was making a sort of guess on who that king was.
I'll have to look for that, I guess though.
I think it's Veerabalala.
Could be, I guess though.
Yeah, I think it's Veerabalala. And then later after that, Vishnuvardhana came along, and he was sort of the most important guy over there.
So, as such, there were still people were involved. The fights never stopped, nor did any
Mhm.
of the battles in the north. So the north still was waging wars, but south was somewhat comfortable. So temples and culture were still retained, and not just culture, even cuisines and all of those things were still retained as originality because there were no influences from other sides as well, right?
Mhm.
And the only
Yeah,
time we had influences was at the time of Portugal. You know, we have this place in Pondicherry, right? It's a place which is pretty much French,
yeah,
right?
the whole
Yeah,
France invasion.
correct. And we also have Portugal, we also have British, and that's when you see a little bit of variance in terms of culture. But primarily, you would see them as this.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so many places still retain that essence, sort of, and they don't want to give up that essence. So yeah,
Sure. And the next one we have would be the Western Chalukyas we discussed earlier. They're known as Kalyani or Kalyana Chalukyas as well.
hmm
And the person who founded this would be Tailapa, or also known as Taila II, right?
hmm
And he ruled for around 24 years. I don't have much for this particular kingdom for some reason. Again, I couldn't find a lot. Do you have anything specifically for this particular dynasty?
I mean, even I couldn't find anything specific to the Western Chalukya Empire, other than the fact that they were also a division of the main Chalukya Empire that was started by Immidi Pulikeshi. But yeah, nothing sort of special about this. But yeah, they did rule of, I think, 200, more than 200 years, I think. Yeah, one king. Most of these kings they've never ruled for more than 25 to 30 to 40 years, and they sort of started rotating. And yeah, I mean, Kalyani, like you stated, Kalyani Empire. But I don't have much on this.
Go ahead. Right. So, other than that, I think we're almost coming to an end in terms of the kingdoms. We just have two major kingdoms we have left. One is the Hoysala Empire,
Mhm.
as well as the uh, the sorry,
Vijayanagar.
Vijayanagar Empire. Sorry. So,
Yeah.
only two of those things which we need to discuss. What do you have for the Hoysala Empire? Like, who would be the prominent king of this particular empire, and what are their contributions?
Yeah, so the most prominent king would be, of course, Vishnuvardhana. So, lesser known fact about Vishnuvardhana, this was not his original name. So, when I stated earlier that there was a time period when Jainism and Buddhism was sort of being popularized, and the whole Gomateshwara statue was established, and Buddhism was also being spread at the same time. Vishnuvardhana was one of the first kings that was strongly influenced by this sort of culture, change in culture, and he sort of adapted Hindu Vaishnavism, and
Mm-hmm.
his original name being Bitti Deva. So his original name was Bitti Deva, and then later, after he converted to his Hindu Vaishnavism school of thought, he later took the name Vishnuvardhana, and he was the main reason for popularizing Jainism in this area, in the Deccan Plateau region. And the Hoysalas were also sort of mainly known for their art and culture, and not many sort of accolades apart from that. But yeah, the spread of Jainism was mainly credited to Vishnuvardhana at that point of time. And yeah, Karnataka being their uh, you know origin, the place where they started this kingdom. And yeah, I think that's, and also, yeah, temples, of course, many temples being established as well. And yeah, apart from that, there's not much about the Hoysala dynasty, Vishnuvardhana being the primary focus. So yeah.
Good. So we discussed about the kings of the Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, right? There's one more
hmm
person I failed to mention. So this entire Varanasi incident, right? We're talking about Kashi and the incident over there.
Yeah.
There was another
hmm
king called Govinda Chandra, who
hmm
ascended the throne in around 1152 C, 1115 CE,
Mm-hmm.
and he also put up a strong resistance in terms of protecting area. So his grandfather was Chandradeva, who when he was ruling Karnataka at this point of time, even the
Mm-hmm.
parts of Varanasi was within his area of control, right? So
Oh,
his
yeah.
grandson, we mentioned earlier, right? Some regions would overlay, right?
Yeah.
That's how it's always been, right? And his
Mm-hmm.
grandson at that point of time, and he went and he also had this battle. He also put a strong force, and he even put an inscription, like he updated an inscription in Sarna, and his wife Kumar Devi praised her, and here's a fun part, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this entire war was going on. The Turks were still invading India, and
Mm-hmm.
during the attacks, his wife praised her husband for protecting the city from the wicked Turks by not just
Mm-hmm.
being in his particular region where he's, the capital where he is, but he went all the way over there to fight. Even though this was part of his kingdom, he went all the way over
Mm-hmm.
there to fight. And the culture and tradition was so strong, and even his wife was praising him to the public,
Mm-hmm.
saying, "What my husband has done is not something many would do. Right? You're going all the way over there to fight for your dharma."
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, most of these contributions come towards their culture, and the fact that they're so proud of their culture. I think that's what's special about these.
Yes, sir. We have other people as well. Like there's a lot to say when we're talking about the incidents, right? I think we should probably have a discussion around the invasion, the Ghazni and Gori duration, right? And maybe
Yes,
we could
yes.
discuss more on those things, I guess, though, because we're getting deviated. And I know there are really cool stories to talk about in the Ghazni and Gori situation. Like, what are the kings who were involved, and all of those. Most of the people over there, you wouldn't even heard of the names. That's how the history has been, right? I don't know who these
Yeah.
people were. I don't know who Narayana Bhatta was. He built the temple. I don't know who Todarmal was. He was a king, and I had no idea who he is, right? So many things, and we don't know them.
Yeah, and we have this whole detailed description of the invasions that happened in India and who all were involved in the invasions, but we don't have much knowledge about who were immune to that invasion and who was the resistance that was fighting the invasion. So that's just one side of the coin that's being displayed throughout our lives, and yeah, I think we can play a small tiny role in making people familiarize with the other side of the coin, the opposite side of the invasion, who are fighting the invasion.
Exactly. So yeah, I think we should probably do a discussion on that. And for now, yeah,
Yeah.
let's go to the famous one. I think this is everyone's favorite, I guess, the Vijayanagar Empire.
So, yes, sir, definitely. Vijayanagar Empire. What can be said about this empire? Everyone knows the the girth of this empire, the sort of greatness that they've established, and the most prominent ruler of that empire, Devaraya the first. And it was sort of in a time where it was a Karnata Samraj. The term that's being used is the Karnata Empire, as opposed to the Vijayanagar Empire. So at this point of time, Vijayanagar Empire was not the name that was being used by the other territories. It was the Karnata Samraja that was being referred to, and as you know, it was established by Harihara and Bukkaraya, famously known as Hakka Bukka. I think we have all heard the Ashok Chakra, not the Ashok Chakra. What's the comic book name? The comic book that we all used to read when we were small. The 20-page comic book with the Indian history and all.
I have
Uh,
not said. Are you talking about I, Tinkle?
uh, Am- no, 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 not Tinkle. Amar Chitrakatha. Got it.
How much
Amar
is the
Chitrakatha.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Amar Chitrakatha. Yeah, we've read about Hakka and Bukka in the Amar Chitrakatha, and Harihara and Bukkaraya being the establishers of the Vijayanagar Empire. And the entire Vijayanagar Empire, or I should say Karnata Samrajya, was sort of divided into four parts. It was the Sangama dynasty, the Saluva dynasty, Tuluva dynasty, and the Aravidu dynasty. So these were the four divisions that the Vijayanagar Empire was divided amongst. And the most prominent ruler being Devaraya the first. Devaraya, of course, I think out of the bunch that we talked about, out of the royal kings that we talked about, Devaraya was the one that was the most fierce, that was the most aggressive king that we've spoken about. The reason why I say that, there was one incident that happened at the time of Devaraya's rule. So it was a few years into Devaraya's rule on onto the Karnataka Samrajya, and during this time there was an invasion that happened by Firoz Shah. It was an emperor named as Firoz Shah who led the invasion, and it was from the Bahmani side. It is sort of on the upper right side of the Karnataka Samrajya, the Vijayanagar Empire. So the Bahmanis led an invasion led by Firoz Shah, and in order to scare them off, in order to sort of warn them off, Devaraya, what he did was he took the heads of all the soldiers, he cut off the heads of their body, and he sort of laid them on the road, on the path itself. And he just laid them out in such a way that it kind of spooked Firoz Shah in such a way that Firoz Shah just ran backwards towards his kingdom. So at this point of time, the Bahmani Empire, the Bahmani region was an Islamic region. It was, invaded, and it was sort of converted into an Islamic area. And what uh, Devaraya did was he sort of followed Firoz Shah into his house, into his kingdom, and Devaraya just invaded that place, and he destroyed all of the Islamic mosques and the Islamic building, and he sort of got the final laugh on that war, and then finally he chopped off the head of Firoz Shah. So just this incident tells you how fierce and how ruthless this king was, Devaraya was at that point of time, in his prime years, of course. And then later during his reign, he also built the Tungabhadra dam, and building this dam sort of solved the water scarcity problem for all the farmers on the other side of town. So a lot of accomplishments, a lot of things that he did throughout his period. And also one more thing that I forgot to mention, Krishna Devaraya, also one more prominent ruler. He belonged to the Tuluva dynasty, and of course, during the period of Krishna Devaraya, we heard the famous stories. We all know of the famous stories wherein the whole kingdom was so damn prosperous that gold was literally being sold on the sides of roads. That's how prosperous the entire kingdom was. And at this point of time, the culture, the Kannada culture, the Tamil culture, all of these things have sort of emerged, and taken their own place. They have established their own place at one point of time, and they sort of carried on. And it was at an all-time peak. They also built the Devaraya Dam, which I just mentioned, the Tungabhadra Dam. The Devaraya Dam was built at the time of Devaraya the first, and then the Hazara Rama temple also being built in the same region as their governance. And after the 16th century, it sort of declined, and sort of, I wouldn't say stopped existing. It's just that the quality of the administration just went down. And after
The
the battle of
involvement pretty much was reduced more or less,
yeah,
like not as prominent as
yeah,
how they used to be.
they sort of declined in their own manner. And I think it was the battle of Talikota that they were defeated at one point of time, and then after that it just went bottoms up, and the whole kingdom just perished. The culture got declined, and the whole whatever temples that they've built still exist to this day. And but yeah, the whole Vijayanagar, the Karnataka Samrajya temple just sort of stopped existing at that point of time after the 16th century.
That's the fall of the Vijayanagar Empire, one of the greatest empires we had to
Yeah.
depict in India or Karnataka.
The greatest one.
Yes, and yeah, so in terms of the kingdoms, right, just to talk about the takeaways of what our discussion was,
Hmm.
whatever dynasties came before, whatever came after,
Hmm.
all of them had one thing in common, which is they had a successful time as in Their period of ruling was really good. They were involved in cultural as well as religious beliefs, propagating them. Education was always primary requirement as well, and they left a mark. Scriptures, architect, and each of them have their own distinct design as well, right? Whatever they're building as well. So each of them have their own design of how they have used it in terms of making the country better, and we still see that up until today as well, right? You see those structures which we have, and all of these places, and at some point you feel that if we hadn't had such marvelous dynasties, we wouldn't have such long lasting places. Even though most of them are more or less ruins at this point, they're still
Yeah.
tourist spots where they're still beautifully done.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that makes it so special is that these were just built out of rocks and stones. And most of these scriptures and most of these temples that they're built still stands to this day as a test of time. And even though we have such advanced materials, advanced technology, our concrete roads don't last more than a year, not even more than a year, more than 6 months. But these temples made out of rocks and stones, they have lasted for centuries at one point of time.
Yes, sir. So yeah, that's the discussion we wanted to have in terms of the kings of Karnataka. Soon we would do more of these things. We had several kings, we have queens, we have freedom fighters from Karnataka. We would cover eventually, and next week we'll be doing queens of India. We're talking about prominent queens all over India, not just Karnataka this time, and the roles they have played. And
Mhm.
again, we're not looking for the obviously known famous ones. We're looking for, we're trying to show the ones who are not well known, and that's the whole point of it. So which means if some of them are not here, not because we are isolating them, it's just we're bringing others to the limelight as well, right?
Yes.
So we will do that, and once we're done with that, we'll eventually come back to prominent kings again, like in all over India, some of the kings which we had and what contributions they played throughout, and that would be
Mhm.
something which would help, people who are interested in learning those things at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's it, I guess. You have anything else before we close?
Nothing much from my side. Of again, curious and interested in delivering the next podcast, which is going to be on the Queens. So that's always going to be special. And yeah, I think it was a good one that we did today. It was a
Yes,
decent one.
sir. Yes, sir. I agree. I think, yeah, more to come. More of these interesting topics, names, famous peoples, or some famous people that we haven't heard about
Hmm. Yes, sir. Definitely.
at some point.
Always ready for that.
So yeah, thanks for joining, and see you again next week, next Thursday, same time.
Thank you.
Thank you.